innovative approaches to global challenges. And this event is being co-organized together with Engineers Without Borders, California Polytechnic State University, St. Louis Obispo Student Chapter, and Taylor Klein is the moderator of today's event, and we are very happy and proud to work with you. And Taylor and Marta, they are organizing this in the context also of the UN Major Group Children and Youth, the Science Policy Interface, and we are happy and proud to have also Yango, the youth constituency for climate topics within the UN system, as one of the partners of today's event. And with Taylor, we agreed that I would briefly make a little bit of introduction and present the aims of the event from our perspective. So our organization, the name says it already, it's about innovative approaches to global challenges, and our main message of the organization and also of today's event is that there's a need for multi-stakeholder engagement. The national governments, who have been somehow the main entity handling global challenges, they have recognized that it's not really leading to good enough results if only national governments work on sustainable development and climate action. We need everybody engaged, and here with our organization we are convinced that young people are really the ones that are most important for getting the world on a more sustainable track. We see it with the climate strikes and people and leaders like Greta Thunberg, that young people have really the potential, the power really to change things, to drive society. And our message is that if we invest in youth, if we invest in an ecosystem that is really empowering youth to become well-resourced educators for climate and sustainable development, or that we equip them with the knowledge, the technologies, and with the funding that they can become climate entrepreneurs, sustainable energy entrepreneurs, that there is so much positive impact that one can achieve. And so that's the first message is youth engagement and youth empowerment is essential for a sustainable world. And the second message is knowledge and technology are very important, really key enabler for youth action. And the third message is that we need a global ecosystem, a global collaborative effort, a multi-stakeholder partnership, and the social innovations, institutional innovations that will really deliver this. And our organization has created this multi-stakeholder partnership GLOCHA. GLOCHA is standing for Global Challenges, as the uniting force of humanity, no matter what religion, what nation, or whatever you are. We need to work together to address effectively global challenges, because otherwise we are all doomed. And that's somehow the message. We really need to be innovative. Social innovation combined with technological innovation and also resource mobilization innovation and things like this. That's the way to go, and that's why we are here. And we are happy to be here with young leaders, for youth, with youth. What could be better than this? And with this, I give to Taylor and take the lead.
Thank you, Miro. I don't think I'm quite as good at projecting as Miro, so if anyone can ever not hear me, please let me know. So first of all, thank you to all of you for sticking around a little longer, for being here for this event, and thank you all of our panelists for being here as well. So my name is Taylor Klein, and I am from Engineers Without Borders, California Polytechnic State University. So that's a group that works on student-led development projects, both globally and locally. And I'm also here representing the major group for children and youth as a technology focal point, leading youth engagement in the STI forum this year. And we're excited for this event and to collaborate with all of you and to work with IAAI, GLOCHA, and Yango as well on our panel. So just some context setting. based around our focuses. The most recent IPCC report emphasizes that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is possible, but will require urgent global action. The scope and scale of climate change and its impacts is unprecedented, from rising sea levels that threaten entire communities to changing weather patterns and catastrophic disasters. So everyone is vulnerable to these impacts, but there are specific groups that are most impacted by these things. So one of these groups is local and indigenous people. So part of this event is empowering non-government actors to be involved in climate change. And we believe that bringing local and indigenous knowledge and local indigenous people to that table in decision-making processes is crucial to creating effective climate action. So with this role, we will be able to intake the much finer spatial and temporal scale that local and indigenous knowledge exists on. And through the long-term observations of environmental change and the deep knowledge of natural surroundings, we can contribute to broader awareness of climate impacts. We can also gain a greater understanding of how to cope with and adapt to environmental variability through a broad range of solutions that local communities have found over time. Additionally, traditionally practiced natural solutions such as fire management, community forestry, and soil enhancement offer potential to increase carbon sinks and mitigate climate change. So these are just some broad examples of how we can include these stakeholders in our process of climate action. And we'll hear more from Sylvia and David on these topics later on. But bringing together these diverse solutions in order to mitigate climate change and involve these actors is crucial. So that's our bit from the UNMGCY. So I'll turn it over to our representative from Youngo.
Hi. So my name is Saad Amer. I am the founder of an organization called +1 Vote, which is dedicated to getting out the vote in the United States. But I'm here as a representative for Youngo, which is the youth constituency to the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So Youngo itself is all about youth empowerment, youth engagement, and getting youth access to spaces like this at various UN forums, from the COPs to the STI. We have over 250 member organizations with more than 6,000 individual members and have been around since 2009. So as you were just mentioning, the recent IPCC report mentions the reality that we really need to limit warming to 1.5 degrees in potential warming. And the reality is, to attain that, we are going to have to mobilize $40 trillion in funding by 2030. And that, if we don't, we're essentially on the brink of a catastrophe if we don't take urgent action. And as of now, there's very little being done. Young people have been working all around the world, as I'm sure you guys have seen in the news, on a local, subnational, national, and international level. We are digital natives. We are people who are at the forefront of technology and use computers and cell phones as extensions of ourselves, as things we don't even see as barriers, as things that can potentially create solutions across the world to create a more climate resilient world. Technologies can be used, for example, for groundwater management, sustainable food production, novel agricultural practices, energy efficient and low carbon buildings, electrification of transportation, blockchain for efficient trading, machine learning and artificial intelligence, and scaling up disaster mitigation and adaptation technologies. These are things that are largely in the research phase around the world, but are slowly starting to be developed and implemented, and we need to see more of that from the various stakeholders that we have in this room. What's interesting about being a youth is that we are at this intersection of being one of the most, as being the population that is the most vulnerable to climate change. It will affect us the most. Having the least representation in spaces like this, people tend not to listen to us unless we mobilize millions of people in the streets. And yet are the people that have the most innovative solutions, because we are the ones who have the largest access to digital technologies around the world. So it's essential that we have youth integrated into all of these different approaches at every level across the world. And in saying that, I want to mention that the youth that I'm referring to in that last part is largely the privileged youth, the youth who've come from more developed nations. I think it's important that at these sort of technological forums that we don't forget the people who don't have access to these technologies, that we don't live in a digital bubble that further disenfranchises communities that don't have access. So if we're looking at developed nations who have youth and the population at whole that doesn't have access to internet or even electricity, those people are exponentially falling behind because they're not able to not only deal with the repercussions of climate change, but aren't even able to address the issues that they have in their lives as a whole. So just want to make sure that in these conversations, we think about those communities and don't forget those in these conversations. And so with that, I thank you all for coming out here and for integrating climate in our discussions and technology, because I think oftentimes people look at technology as a profit-driven sort of matrix, which is great, it can do that, but we must also remember that technology and climate touch every single one of the SDGs, and in that way can touch all of us in our individual approaches to our various courses of work. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Miro and Saad, for those opening remarks as well, and some context setting. We'll start out with we are broken into 3 different thematic clusters in order to encompass the wide array of solutions that are encompassed in this event. So our first thematic cluster will be based around the multi-stakeholder partnership, that is GLOCHA, and the role of knowledge, technology, and innovation in youth empowerment for climate action. So I'll turn it over to GLOCHA.
Thank you very much, Taylor. And I will cover this topic, also the introduction, the first presentation of this cluster together with Jerica, our team member and expert here in New York. So, what is GLOCHA? So, I said it's we need the social innovation, we need institutional innovation to really do the empowerment for youth so that youth can lead and have impactful and rewarding engagement opportunities in Agenda 2030. So our message, Youth Power for a Better World. GLOCHA is the next big thing in action for people and planet. It's the social innovation you have been dreaming of. And so it's empowering the global citizen to take action towards the achievement of global goals. We are focusing on youth empowerment through resource mobilization, music, GLOCHA centers in every city, and incentivization and gamification based on modern information technology. We had initially planned to have for this side event audio-visual support, also with projector and so, but then the conference services here sent us an invoice of $900, and then we said, okay, perhaps we don't need the presentations that much. But if you go on glocha.info, glocha.info, and then in the news section you will find a music contest, the Earth Music Awards, as the key activation mechanism for people to start to think about their role in the fight against the climate crisis, and then also having a big event in connection with the UN. We had planned to have it in September in the context of the Secretary General Climate Summit, but and the Secretary General was in Katowice at the COP24 last year, and where he presented his ideas for his summit. He said he wants to see one of the key outcomes of his summit will be unprecedented youth and civil society mobilization. And we said, okay, that's us. They need us. We have to work with them. But then they have lowered the expectations and so they are now just saying they want youth to have engaged in all the topics, but the reaching out beyond the UN bubble, this will again not happen at this summit. But as we need everybody engaged, we need initiatives like this Action Now campaign, and our plan B now is to work on this with the incoming President of the General Assembly because at the hearing that was 2 days ago, he announced that he will have new ways of civil society engagement and youth engagement. And perhaps, Jerica, if you would like to add some perspectives from your communication expert perspective, and also from your expert on local development perspective, how the work we are doing connects with real life challenges and opportunities of people.
Hi, my name is Jerica Ray Whitlock. I'm a part of the advisory team here at IAAI GLOCHA. And today, just to hit hard on that context one more time, is that effectively addressing the challenges that have come about due to climate change. This is going to require effective mobilization of all stakeholders, especially our young people. How many people in this room feel responsible for a healthy and sustainable future? Raise your hand. How many people have found an active platform where they're able to even think about mass mobilization here on Earth? Good. We have to consider on cultural levels that there is a trust factor in everyday life with the general public. What they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're tasting, what they're smelling, all of that is art. We live in it every day. Our clothes, the buildings we walk around in, everything is art. So when we take a concept like Action Now and music, being able to leverage music as a tool to create a common tongue amongst the people so we know what climate change is, so we know how to address it, all of that comes in with a cultural trust that we can build through the arts. It's important for us that we equip ourselves with the right tools to address the lowest levels of poverty as well as the highest levels in the 1 percentiles. We need a language that will speak to them both, that makes sense for engagement. The general public needs to make sense of what we are doing so that they can participate with us properly. And the reason why I joined this team is because Miro, I say this all the time, that the youth need equality of access to this space. As we are young, we're all involved in the creative arts one way or another, and the arts gives us the power to think in an exponential realm. It causes a spark of creativity. Creativity is what breeds solutions. So in fact, the youth need meaningful participation. And that's what we see here. Technology, arts, is a quality of access that's been given to us with this particular platform through GLOCHA and Action Now. And the way that I see it, these systematic solutions, this great machine that we are creating needs a very practical application. And I truly feel in my heart that music is a very practical application of communication. And we need but simple tools such as Ed Erdenberg has created with the charity platform. It's not just a way that you can donate, but it's actually a way that technology can reach people through all platforms for real spark of engagement, that half a second that you say yes or no to a swipe. This person and his team, they figured out a way to engage you with that moment. These are just tools, much like the Sustainable Development Goals, just frameworks. It's up to us to come together in this particular multi-stakeholder platform to apply our good works in the context and in the realms that it belongs in. We won't find ourselves working too deeply within these walls, we're going to find ourselves super collaborating outside of this place, because it is for-profit industry that we must unwind those soiled behaviors, but we have to have the highest level of coherence. And the way that we do that is by sharing. And again, common tongue. What are we all talking about? Trigger words, we all know what it means. So that's a bit of a surface level of not only the type of participation that I'm having within this organization to take a very organic situation of trust and apply it in a system of technology that we can really engage and do the thing that we want to do, which is mass mobilization toward the accomplishment of the Sustainable Development Goals. The youth, us, how many people are under 35 in this room? Actually, just stand up, please. Just stand up. Everyone, please give these people a round of applause for being here. Thank you for your presence, because it's up to us to carry all of this into the future. And as we extend ourselves in trust building with the community, I hope that we can build trust amongst ourselves so that we can be true co-collaborators and achieve a sustainable future. Thank you.
On the agenda we have John Crawley now, as we had the plan to have a video conference. He is based in Paris. He's the head of the Secretariat of the Management of Social Transformation Program of UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization. And they are the main social science research network within the UN system. And they have been also partner of our Global Challenges Youth Music Contest for the COP21 in Paris. And he said it's a pity he cannot be with us, but he's conveying his best regards, and that he is very much interested to work with us, to work with youth on empowerment for climate action, and also on these new technologies like blockchain, how this can empower multi-stakeholder action and new business models and everything. And we are still mentioning him because it's in Austria we have the saying, tell me who you are with and I will tell you who you are. No? And we have really very wonderful partners like Jerica and also the youth networks, and also people like John Crawley are really the quality guarantors for us that what we are doing has really a strong knowledge base, and if we might go in the wrong direction, they will help us to find the right ways again. And with this, perhaps we give then to add.
Yeah, so Jerica mentioned in her powerful message about youth empowerment, charity.com. So we'll have Ed Ehrenberg talk a little bit more about that platform.
Thanks so much, and thanks to Miro and everyone on the team, not only for this great opportunity, but for this moment in time where I believe, as Jerica put so eloquently, we have an opportunity to use tools. And I've spent the last half a decade with my team developing a tool for specifically youth mobilization. And it's not something that you download from an app store. It is an invisible platform that works across social media and other dark platforms that can be tracked and can instigate action. And so I feel like this is a great moment in time with the adversity that we all face to be able to rise up together and use those tools in a creative way to overlay our individual impressions onto something that can be global, is the opportunity to influence and to change things. And so that's what I've been working on for years, and this moment represents for me the accumulation of that effort, because we can take this process and use it to engage people. And I'll just very quickly tell you how it works. We engage people by allowing them to share a piece of personal content. It could be a selfie, it could be just any photo really, but it is personalized at each level, in direct contrast, I think, to most of the types of platforms that enable social good. So I share my photo, which then can be projected to my group of friends, and they can share it and join directly from me. Now, we are tracking this, but we're not hiding what we're tracking. We're doing this intentionally so that we can create a network of connected people, some of whom we already know, others we don't. And so we need to get that whole group of people, the people who already believe, and engage their friends and other people that they know in their networks and project a positive message that they can get behind. And the way we're going to do that is by allowing you to simply tell us what you're going to do, what your action is. We're going to give you some pre-chosen choices that are going to be around climate action and let you pledge that action, and then we're going to have you take a photo that represents that with a frame that allows you to be a part of that and customize that message and then share it in order to spread that message with your friends. And that could be on Facebook, or it could be on Instagram, or it could be on text message and not on a social network at all. But each time we have a person connect from another person, we're going to know who they are, and we're going to have, in some cases, the ability to reach back out to them and continue to message to them and turn what would normally be just awareness into true action with trackable outcomes. Where there are some other great outputs as well, we're going to have that photographic content, which again, when you talk about creativity and bringing that together, when you see the types of content that people share in support of the causes that they love and care about, it's an extremely emotional and effective way to spread that message, talking about the story, but sort of reducing that down to just a 60-second engagement. So we do not send you to an app store. We have you join directly from the social network in which you are already encountering the content just by clicking on it and then immediately adding your photo and joining. So that happens at a very rapid rate, especially when we're talking about something as important as this campaign. And so we're going to put that together, and we're going to bring a new audience, a tool, right? Not a magical bullet, but a tool to use together to spread that message to as many people as possible. It's pure technology, but we've spent a lot of time and effort in making sure that we erased every bit of that from the experience and the user interface. So this is a very, very, very light process. We have an extremely high conversion rate, higher than just about anything you've probably ever seen in this arena. And we are very excited to now turn this tool loose for action now.
Thank you, Ed. We'll now turn it over to Andrew McDonald, who's also a partner with GLOCHA from the Friendship Ambassadors Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you. All your comments have just been heartwarming in many respects and motivating, because that's all we do is work with young people. And Friendship Ambassadors Foundation is most widely known for their youth assembly, our youth assembly, which we conduct twice a year. But actually the organization has been around for coming on 50 years, and it was started by a young person, and it has always been around youth action. And so for the last 15 years, we've been conducting youth assemblies. We'll be conducting our 24th in a few months, where about 1,000 young people attend from over 100 countries. And it's a great event, it's an inspiring event, but there's one challenge that we have faced with, is the young people that come to that, who enjoy coming and enjoy engaging on topics, want to do something. They want action. And that's where I came on board about 8 months ago, and attended one of these assemblies and said, we love coming, we love the assembly, the content is great, it's a great chance to interact and network, but we want to take action. So what we did last year, after our August assembly, was to start what we called an impact challenge. And we conducted our first impact challenge at the youth assembly last year. Didn't know how many individuals, how many delegates, as we called them, would want to partake. And we had over 100 proposals for projects. And they go through a vetting process. There are panels and whatnot, and 3 individuals are awarded some small seed funding. So obviously we had something here and said, listen, we need to take this further. So because great, I won the challenge, now what? And so what we did was we created a very small network of individuals, previous delegates, that would be willing to, that we could connect these delegates with, because they had a proposal, and one of these individuals would either mentor or advise them to sort of direct them on how they could take their proposal to the next level. So great, that was really accepted and really well received, and it has grown. So then what do we do now? Okay, so we're going to continue that on. We're conducting yet another impact challenge, but now enter technology. And what we want to do right now is create a platform utilizing community-based technology and connect these individuals globally. And we're going to create what we call a Global Action and Impact Network, or we like to call it GAIN, where we will have hubs around the world of what we like to call friendship ambassadors and connect them. And 4 of our focused areas, climate and technology are 2 of our 4 focus areas. The others are human development and peace and security. So obviously climate and technology are really high priorities for us. And so the end result of this, the culminating event, and I'd like to see, hopefully it won't be the only culminating event, is a global impact challenge that we will run this fall, and I'd like to think that we're going to be doing a number of these, and obviously the focus will be technology. So we are all about youth action and impact. We're an organization that is in change, and we are moving in this direction, and the reception thus far that we've received from our young people has been quite exciting. So very pleased to be part of that. In terms of the music, one of the aspects of Friendship Ambassadors, sort of a phase in our growth years ago, was that we used to conduct musical choirs that we sent around the world, primarily in what was previously known as the Behind the Iron Curtain. And at one point in time, we had 42 musical choirs traveling around the world. And the theme was music is the medium, friendship is our message. And so we're glad to be reintroducing that into our repertoire as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll now turn it over to Laura Weiland, who is from the ECOS and Omega Center for Sustainable Living.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. I already feel like I have so many partners between Miro and what's happening with Locha and actually several other people here, and I'm very excited to talk to you more about what you're doing. So my name is Laura Weiland, and I'm the director of the Omega Center for Sustainable Living. And we are upstate, so we're about an hour and a half north of here, and I'm working on the local level, the regional level, national and global level on climate change. And it's interesting, so last year we started an event with the Project Drawdown team. I don't know how many of you have actually heard of Project Drawdown? A lot of people, or not so many? So basically this is a group of 200 researchers and scientists and advisors that came together to figure out what would it take to reverse global warming. And it's what I have been doing at our center is with the hundreds of school kids that come and visit us every year, because we have an eco machine where we're purifying all of the gray and the black water on campus through plants and microbiology. It's all natural. And so we have these kids that come, and I do all kinds of programming with them. And I've been kind of trying to gauge over the last 10 years, how much do they really understand about climate change and how do they feel about it? And over this time, I've just been finding that, it's either not a lot, or sometimes it's like it's just this heavy thing, but it's this big amorphous thing, and what do I really do about it? And so when this project was published, we had, one of the fellows was one of our faculty, and Paul Hawken was also one of the faculty that's been presenting at Omega for a long time. When that happened, I had something super tangible, the narrative that this brings. And it's all about solutions, and it gives 3 different scenarios about here's really how we could actually do this. Here's how we could get to that point in time when the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere peaks and actually goes down every single year. And so now this is what we've been working with, and we did an incubation event last fall and had the most amazing group of a couple hundred people from across the country, mostly here in the US, also students and everybody, and all the different partners that came together. It was just starting to look at what would it take to bring this into schools? What would it take for schools and communities to start talking about climate change and teaching from a solutions-oriented perspective? On Earth Day, there was a poll from NPR that came out that was saying that under 50% of teachers are actually teaching about climate change, and yet 4 in 5 parents actually wish that they were. And so we're starting, I can tell you for me, last fall when we did this event, the IPCC report had just come out, and all of a sudden it was like something shifted, and all of a sudden we're all talking about climate change more in the media and things. And then more recently, what I'm feeling is that all of these different partners that are working on climate change, we're all starting to realize we're all on the same team. There's no such thing as competition anymore. It's really about coming together and partnering and having this all hands on deck feeling of we're doing this in 10 years, what we have to do. So that's what we're doing, and we're coming back together. We're using almost our entire campus this time in the fall, October 18th through 20th. We'd love to, I'm definitely excited to think about maybe featuring more of what you're doing too, and have so many other things that we're featuring in the in-person piece with presentations and breakout sessions, work sessions, important meetings. And then we're also having satellite sites. Last year we had 50 satellite sites that joined us and organized their own events in their own communities. So the city of Austin, Texas got together with, the sustainability office had, 100 people that were important to their network, and they watched the live stream, but it gave them an excuse to then really do some thinking about their own community. So we would love for anybody to join us in this effort and use this, what we're organizing, and be part of that momentum. And the mass mobilization piece just feels like there's momentum for this. Let's use it, and yeah, I would just love to continue to. And then ECOS, so this group that is coming together. Much like Youngo, it's a constituency for education, communication, and outreach stakeholders community. So I've now, with Miro and Eileen and several others, come together in this group, and we're headed to Bonn for the climate summit at the UN, and really going to do some deep thinking together about what do we do with sort of scaling up climate education, public awareness, and public engagement. So we're marrying all these different things and trying to all be heading in the same direction.
Well, our next thematic cluster is based around enabling technology, specifically blockchain technology and digital reporting, as tools for climate action and climate entrepreneurship. So we'll
living from doing good for the society. This has been the starting point of our side event, because initially we've met with Xiaochen Chang from FinTech for Good, who is also a member of the Climate Chain Coalition, which is a global network of about 180 experts on blockchain technology for climate action. We have been sitting together, and he said that he's working with the economist on social impact investment and how to connect this with the SDGs and using blockchain technology. And then I said, okay, let's propose to the Science, Technology, Innovation Forum a side event about building the ICT infrastructure for the climate action impact economy. Because I'm convinced that this is the biggest economic opportunity in human history. The Paris Agreement said the global community has agreed to transform all the energy systems to zero carbon emissions, to renewables, by the year 2050. And these are trillions of euros. And there are so many places on Earth also that don't have yet energy access. And there are these new and low-cost renewable energy technologies, but there are also these digital technologies, fintech innovations that make possible blended financing, fractional co-ownership, and there are so many things which really have the potential to provide jobs for millions of young people and to provide really services in the field of energy, water, and other SDG relevant needs to the people. And the young people can be the pathfinders for their communities through this kind of technologies if they have if there is a global enabling ecosystem that provides the necessary knowledge, technology, and funding for this. And so that's the context for this thematic cluster, and Xiaochen Chang is really a leader on this in Washington, and also for impact investment, because there's also a lot of money out there that is not really generating returns, because the investors don't have really projects to invest in. But this energy transition is really something which is really economically attractive, and it will be really huge for youth empowerment. So we have here this FinTech for Good networks, and also expertise from The Economist, and Martin Weinstein, who was supposed to be here, but he is having his wedding on Friday, and so there were some last-minute management issues, so he asked to come in via video conference, and then the video conference couldn't happen, so he's not here. But he's from the MIT Media Lab, the Digital Currency Initiative, and they are really wonderful competence center, and they have an initiative called Open Solar, where they have created the IT tools that to help in Puerto Rico schools and communities to put renewable energy systems which also provide access to the internet and which bring in international finance, but with somehow payment modules that lead to ownership of the whole equipment by the community in a very short time. And this kind of models can be really brought all over the place. And Tom will also speak probably about the situation in Puerto Rico in this field. But just having this thematic cluster as one of the elements on which youth engagement in climate action can be built. Because here is an economic opportunity, here is job creation opportunity, here is technological innovation, a driving force, and we need really this social innovation, we need Roger, I'm convinced, to bring really these resources to the local level. And in terms also where the money should come from. One is these social impact investors, but there are also philanthropists. They are the signatories of the Giving Pledge. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they have convinced 183 billionaires' families to pledge to give back to society half of their wealth before they die. They have a combined wealth of $1 trillion, so at least $500 billion are earmarked and in the air, waiting to be channeled toward impactful local action. And if we provide the information system that document impact and that document action, then we connect these global resources with the young people on the local level. And you can read more about these projects, Open Solar, and also a climate-led climate blockchain initiative of MIT on our homepage. Martin has sent us his presentations, and I've uploaded them, and you can read the details about this there.
Thank you, Miro, for sharing a little bit on their behalf. We'll now pass it off to Tom McGrath.
Okay, so thank you so much for having me. We formed Vital Clean Tech about 4 or 5 years ago, and we partner with a another nonprofit called Renewable Nations Institute, and together we're developing a sustainable energy project incubator. So starting off with the title of the presentation is Blockchain for Sustainable Energy Projects, and we have an example of microgrid solutions in Puerto Rico, which are very similar to the rest of small island developing states, SIDS. Again, the trillions of dollars, hard for us to wrap our heads around that, but according to Sustainable Energy for All, we have between now and 2030 a requirement that we spend $1.3 trillion a year on sustainable energy project CapEx. And CapEx is like the cost of a project. So if we do that, and that's for sustainable renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy access. So it really covers the world's needs. And if we do that, we may be able to keep ourselves into alignment with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Unfortunately, this week in Hawaii, where they measure carbon in the atmosphere, we reached 215 ppm. And if any of you are familiar with 415, I'm sorry, 415. And if you're familiar with 350.org and Bill McKibben, 350 is where we should be. So this is really a scary situation for us to think about collectively. I'll just go to briefly, so the way that the energy projects work in the world, and all energy projects, almost all of them until 5, 10, 20 years ago have been fossil fuel projects, and now we're getting into more renewables, steadily into more renewable energy. But basically, the way that projects are financed are through ESCOs, so energy service contracts. And energy service contracts, you may have heard of Enron. People who are older than 35 probably heard of Enron. But basically, that was the most, people hadn't really heard about what ESCOs are until Enron. There was a big fraud case, and there was a lot of bad business dealings, and many executives went to jail. But the ESCO idea is that you pay for the capex of the project over time. So we're just going to focus on sustainable energy project finance, and applying the ESCO models that exist today there are many of them, but the main ones are power purchase agreements, which you may have heard about, energy efficiency agreement, and shared savings agreements. So basically, you're coming up with a contract for the money that it costs to put a system in, either solar on the roof, wind farm, change the lighting out to LED, energy efficiency, plug loads so that you have more efficient, you can greatly reduce the amount of energy that a city is using by doing energy efficiency. Then you do the renewable energies to cover all that energy. So all of that costs money. And the ESCO pays for a sustainable energy project capex over time. So it's very simple. It's like a mortgage on a house. It's like a car payment. Someone else, you don't pay for the whole car up front with cash necessarily, unless you can and you want to. But otherwise, you're basically amortizing it over time. So where blockchain comes in, underlying the main contract, there are many smaller contracts, subcontracts in an ESCO. So for sustainable energy projects, there's going to be an insurance wrap of some sort. There's going to be a manufacturer's warranty. There's going to be a real estate lease. There's going to be carbon offsets. There's going to be feed-in tariff. And then there's be the PPA or the EEA. And what those are, you think of those as smart contracts. So if people are familiar with blockchain at all, there's sort of 3 main levels. One is smart contracts. You can lower the cost of the ESCO financing. You can lower those costs significantly by having simple, agreed upon contracts, and you can scale this on the community level. So now that we're going from large utility-based energy systems, which some of that will be renewable, huge solar farms outside of Vegas, or huge windmills in different parts. We're also doing, we can talk about this on a community level, so community co-ops and energy co-ops. So you have smart contracts. Okay, the next thing is over the term of the ESCO, the stakeholders will rely on accurate and verifiable accounting for all the parties. And that's, in blockchain, that's ledger, right? So now you have a hyperledger. You have smart contracts, hyperledger, and then sustainable energy project ESCO financing is greatly enhanced by immutable transaction logs on chain computers for participant consensus, and that's the definition of blockchain. So you basically have the smart contracts, which are the initial agreements, and they could be micro contracts or large contracts. But and then you have a hyperledger, which is going back and basically recording all of that information over time, and that information and transaction logs are locked in an immutable reference. So you have a blockchain solution for ESCO financing, and this is going to lower the cost of the projects, and that'll be helpful for everyone. So in the Caribbean, I would just basically had a little slide here, which you can look at later, but basically producing small scale, community scale wind and solar and battery storage. You'll have a meter of some sort, several meters that are authenticating what energy was used, what energy was generated and what energy is used. And then you have a smartphone or a dashboard for a community leader or individual houses, where you'll be able to purchase in the fiat, in the dollars or pesos, whatever it's going to be, and that controls the access and the payment for the energy. So you have inexpensive renewable energy in places where energy is very expensive today and is causing climate change. So the application of blockchain for sustainable energy projects is all about the delivery of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy access. I'll just leave it there. You can look at the slides. There's some more pictures of interesting solar wind combos, microgrid systems for island nations. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Tom. We'll now go
Thank you, Taylor. So I'm going to wrap it back around to the first panel as well. So I'm going to do a little integration of thought theory here. So 2 quotes. Ed mentioned the emotional story. So storytelling to mobilize, and emotions help mobilize. And then Laura mentioned narrative. So my background is conflict and peace studies and software engineering, where I have studied user interface design. So, if you get your mission sorted out, and our mission here is to mobilize for climate action, the digital reporting then is for climate action. So the emotional storytelling with data is to create and drive the dialogue for action. So we build in order to achieve and accomplish the solution to get us out of this 415 ppm, right? So, this is not bits and bytes. We don't dream in bits and bytes. We don't go, oh, 0001111. That's not what we do. We dream an image, maybe character, some sort of plot line, a little bit of narrative, and then it might shift. It might not have a time sequence. But we dream as human beings connected in some way. And in order to drive really actionable climate solutions, we need to enhance that consensus, that community making. So that's what data can do if it's aligned with the mission. So let's not talk zeros and ones right now. This is the digital reporting for action. So a little slide deck. I basically say sustainable project digital reporting tools like global benchmarks and dashboards with data visualizations can tell the story of qualitative and quantitative metrics, maps, and system flows, which we've seen a lot of at this forum, by the way. Beautiful, beautiful story maps, actually, just stunning work. And then it frames consensus, it empowers project stakeholder communication, it cultivates community, and that creates pathways for resilience through dialogue. So dashboards create dialogue. If you look it up, if you look up definitions of what a dashboard is meant to do, it's supposed to create dialogue. A business dashboard creates dialogue between business entities. Well, same thing with the community dashboard. So we have the pleasure of being an administrative awardee of City of LA Free the Food Waste program last year, Bioproducts Innovation Center. It's a project out of LA Clean Tech Incubator. And my slide deck is a series of little snaps from the website where we worked with 8 different community groups. Some were schools, one was a Little Tokyo, Sustainable Little Tokyo effort, and they had a Bokashi program. Bokashi is a very interesting alternative to composting that actually allows you to have meat waste, which is quite helpful. If you eat meat, what do you do with the meat from your compost? You have to separate it out. So anyway, and then there were school programs, and it shows pictures of the kids saving or saving essentially their school lunch tray waste for compost, building the compost bins, etc. But it's that sense of climate action. So you're using the data, so we measured everything, they measured the heat at the center of the pile, there's all sorts of metrics you can measure, but it's about driving climate action. That's what we're doing. We're trying to actually educate and empower youth to realize that they can do a lot, actually. And it's from the ground up. Some of the story maps that we've been seeing today, yesterday particularly, was from the top down. So it's massive, big data sets that are gorgeous, and you walk in through this data portal and you can drill down. You can also use that for the ground up. For very small, intimate projects that actually deeply build community and agency and build that action stakeholder group. So just putting that out there, thank you.
I would just like to add very briefly something that we are, just to underline that's so important, this reporting. And we see it also in the Agenda 2030 implementation, these voluntary national reviews. But for non-state actors, there is no such mechanism where people could report what they are doing. Yeah. And that's something that we are now exploring with the incoming President of the General Assembly. We are proposing that there should be an innovation group, and which should then also work with the ad hoc working group on the revitalization of the General Assembly to create really, under the leadership of the President of the General Assembly, an entry point for voluntary reporting of sustainable development goals, action of non-state actors, and in particular youth.
Thank you, Miro. Yes, so that, was there another contribution?
There's no audio, so.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. My name is Gail Davis, and I am a UN partner as well as the Academic Council for the United Nations System. It's just two statements I wanted to, well, three. One quick statement is, our group is available to support in any way possible GLOSHA around music and everything. Our background is we've worked with everyone from Gladys Knight to Barry White, Beyonce, and many other people. So we're available to provide that framework in terms of the music industry. What I wanted to say is, I'm in the UN every day, and I hear youth, and youth, please don't get mad at me. But I'm a real straight shooter on this. The youth are not the future. We all are the future together. We need the youth, and the youth need us, but it's not the youth versus one or the other. We have to stop this. It is about all of us working together. I can't do it without them. But it's not of them. They are part of us, and we're a part of them. And because we keep that differentiation, there's a separatism between us. We are learning from each other. And we have to treat them with the respect, excuse me, I'm doing it again. We have to treat youth with the respect that we would any other adult, because they are adults, okay? And so we need to work together in that framework and begin to say a we, and not the youth versus this or that. There are some things within their age group that only they can do, and same for our age group, but it's a we. And when we come from that place, we can address any person on the street to share with them about blockchain, to share with them about the SDGs, climate, or anything. We can mobilize anybody. I talk to 200 people a day about the SDGs, all 17. So if we begin to do that and not just stay in our little bubble sometimes, we will be able to mobilize like that, because that is what the youth do, but we do it together too, all ages. So I hope I'm not out of line by saying that, but I just wanted to make sure that was part of the conversation.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, kind of based around that, as well as Yanko's comments as well. I think it's important for us to think about who we are engaging in this conversation, and what types of people we are engaging, and what type of knowledge is important to this conversation. So our next thematic cluster will be surrounding the critical role of local and indigenous knowledge, as well as nature-based solutions. in climate change, both adaptation, observation, and mitigation, and building more resilient communities. So I'm going to first turn it over to David OConnor to talk a little bit about nature-based solutions.
Okay, thank you very much, Taylor. I will scrap my formal presentation, which I had prepared, because I don't think it probably suits the occasion that well. Maybe I should just say one or two words about IUCN, with whom I work, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. IUCN is the oldest international conservation organization, founded in 1948, and it is an observer at the United Nations General Assembly. And recently, at our last World Conservation Congress, which was held in Hawaii under the previous US administration, we welcomed a new chamber to our governance structure, Indigenous Peoples Organizations. Prior to that, the governance structure consisted of member states and departments or parts of member states, ministries, whatever, and non-governmental organizations, but there was no place at the table in the governance of IUCN for Indigenous Peoples Organizations. So the fact that IUCN has now done that certainly suggests strongly that we recognize the importance of traditional knowledge in nature conservation, because IUCN is essentially a scientific organization above all else. We bring together the leading world scientists in conservation biology and any number of areas, genomics, as maybe some of you heard today at the presentation, the side event we had at lunch, to study the causes of biodiversity loss, threats to species diversity, genetic diversity, and solutions to those challenges. It's in that context that I want to just discuss very briefly nature-based climate solutions, which are sort of staring us in the face, are amongst the lowest cost options for addressing climate change, and yet are probably as feebly being adopted as any other set of climate solutions by most governments in the world. But there are bright spots. There was a study done, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2017, called Natural Climate Solutions, which looked at 20 such. And just to give you a flavor of what I'm talking about here, they range from reforestation and afforestation to avoiding forest conversion to agriculture or other uses, to improve agricultural methods, soil conservation, low tillage, no tillage methods, protection or restoration of wetlands and peatlands, grasslands, and so on. So there are multiple options out there, and to varying degrees countries are investing in them, but on far, far too small a scale. But if these were to be scaled up, according to the paper and the modeling that went into this paper, consistent with protecting food security and fiber security and certain sort of parameters you don't want to touch because you want to address human needs, it is estimated that nature can provide roughly 37%, more than a third, of the greenhouse gas mitigation, net greenhouse gas reductions between now and 2030, to stay with a 66% probability within a 2-degree world, basically, 2-degree increase over pre-industrial mean temperature. So it is a pretty big, it isn't the only solution. The renewable energy story, energy efficiency has to be a huge part of it, transport systems and converting transport systems to zero carbon, electrification, and so on. These have to be an important part of the solution, but nature-based solutions are there, and they are amongst the lowest cost options. So, by the way, what that 37% represents is the cost-effective options out there. That is less than $100 per ton carbon, CO2 equivalent. And of that set of options, about a third of those could actually be implemented for $10 a ton or less, so really low-cost options, okay? But that involves a lot of work to engage communities and discuss with communities and work with communities to implement these at scale. And of course, indigenous peoples, local communities have to be a very important part of the solution if that is to happen. So IUCN and others, we don't take all the credit for this, but many of the big nature NGOs in the world are actually members of IUCN. So we have been working for some time on so-called forest landscape restoration, which is a holistic approach to basically rebuilding degraded lands, protecting existing forests, involving communities, indigenous peoples in that process, and drawing upon and using the indigenous knowledge. Now, when I hear the discussions here, I'm thinking about how does all this relate to you, because you are not living in or near the forest, you're not agriculturalists, most of you. So this may all seem very remote and interesting and academic, but you know, who cares really, you know. So yeah, we use energy and we use transport, and so those things matter to us, and we live in cities, and so how cities are run matters. But these things actually do matter to all of us. Not just because we're affected by climate change, but because, well, if you take, you know, just an example of Hurricane Sandy in New York or any number of other natural disasters, well, not having functioning wetlands to buffer storm surges and such actually matters a whole lot to what happens to your infrastructure, to what happens to your economy in the event of major extreme weather events. So that's on the adaptation side. But as consumers every day, we consume a whole host of products which were produced in ways that impacted positively or negatively, and mostly negatively, on natural systems. Whether it be palm oil that was grown on land converted from rainforest to palm oil plantations, and you can look at any number of products that you consume every day, and I'm sure you'll find palm oil in many of them. You know, to the wood products that we consume, the paper products we consume, some of which may be produced sustainably, and many of them not so. There are certification schemes out there, and as consumers we have some choice in deciding what we're going to consume by deciding to buy, you know, FSC wood products, paper products, or Marine Stewardship Council fisheries, seafood products, or whatever, or Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil certified products. But the reality is, unfortunately, that while surveys of consumer preferences, including millennials, suggest that a significant majority of people are willing, state their willingness to pay more for a product which is sustainably produced, harvested, whatever. When you ask them how much more are you willing to pay, that's when you get into problems, because most people are not willing to pay very much more. And so the question becomes, you know, how much more would you have to pay realistically to be able to harvest these things sustainably? And if you are not willing to pay that premium that would enable the sustainable harvesting, then basically we are all being complicit in the degradation of ecosystems and the loss of biodiversity. And we can't expect, honestly, to transfer the cost of protecting those ecosystems and harvesting, growing crops sustainably to low-income households living in developing countries, which we do if we aren't willing to pay the true cost, the real costs to society, to the climate, to our own, you know, children and grandchildren of unsustainably consuming these products. Now, of course, renewable energy is a great story of how costs can be dramatically reduced over time if you scale things up. Well, we have a story here with nature-based solutions where the costs are already pretty low, but maybe not low enough yet for consumers to be willing to pay, what it would take. So I guess, again, we need to think about how scaling these solutions could help enable economies of scale and drive down some of those costs in the future so that more and more consumers would be willing to pay what it will take to conserve ecosystems that go into providing the ecosystem services on which our societies depend, whether it's water, it's climate protection, or whatever it may be, disaster mitigation, and so on. But one other piece of the puzzle, since we're talking about the SDGs, and this is all in the context of the SDGs, is the reality is that the average consumer going into a store in the United States, I don't speak about other countries, but I'm an American, I can speak about this country with some authority at least. They're not high income earners. They're people sort of eking out a moderate living, lower middle class, whatever it may be, but they're shopping for bargains. They're looking for low prices, not for doing good in their consumption. And that is partly a reflection of the society we live in, where inequalities are huge. And so, most people live on very moderate incomes, and a few people are the Buffetts and Gateses of the world, and more than a few, a large number, but certainly not the vast majority of our population. And so, one of the ways that you could actually address broadening the willingness to pay amongst consumers for sustainability is if you made more consumers a little bit better off financially to be able to afford to pay the premium that a Gates or a Buffett or others are willing to pay. And I give them full credit for their willingness to pay large sums of money, but that isn't a sustainable solution either when most people are not willing to pay even small sums of money for making those kinds of choices. So on that note, let me just end with one personal anecdote, if you will, because we're talking about consumers, but we're also talking about mass mobilization, about people's movements, popular movements, and putting pressure on politicians. And while I'm coming from a scientific organization, and I would argue to the end that we have to have science as the basis for everything we do, to be informed and to be able to argue with those who would deny the science. And Greta Thunberg is a good example of mastering the science before she goes out and does the activism. But activism can really be a powerful tool. And I've been, some of us who are old enough, gray hair, can remember the days when we were activists in our youth, and when it really did make a difference. And I'll just point out, an example in which I was personally involved when I was a graduate student, and we decided on one campus on the West Coast that we would take a stand on the investments of the endowment of our university, and the endowment was very, very large of this university, in companies that do business in South Africa. And we decided that we will make a statement through a civil disobedience action to try to pressure the trustees to change their policy. And our doing that one night in about this time of the year, I guess, in 19 whatever, long time ago, it led to a mass movement across the United States of college campuses, one after the other, basically students doing essentially the same thing, and it led to the divestiture movement in the United States. It's not the thing that brought down on its own apartheid South Africa. It was that South Africans who did that, but it certainly didn't hurt to have that happen. And so that's something that you can do as young people that old people have a harder time doing, to be honest, is to have ideals and to try to put those ideals into practice through whatever it may be. I'm not advocating civil disobedience here. I'm just saying that there are ways to mobilize, to pressure the political leaders, the people in power, the corporations, whether it's through your consumption choices or through your voting decisions or through whatever, going out and having a large demonstration in Washington or wherever. That can actually move the dial on this very, very urgent matter of addressing climate change, and in doing so also addressing life on Earth, biodiversity in its richness. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that deep perspective on nature-based solutions and as well as engagement of multi-stakeholder groups. So we are running a little bit short on time, but Sylvia Riviero is next from the ETC group, and hopefully we will have time after that for discussion.
Okay. So I am from a small international organization that is called the Action Group on Erosion Technology and Concentration, and we have been following both the erosion, the environmental erosion, the erosion of rights, but also the impacts of new technologies on societies, and particularly on the rural areas. But what I wanted to say now, what I was invited to say, speaking about partly on these natural-based solutions, that I want to say that we are part of a coalition of groups that made a report that I recommend for everybody, which is called Missing Pathways to 1.5, the 1.5 degrees. And is many of the pathways that were not really taken into account by IPCC, particularly the ones that David mentioned before me, which is the restoration of ecosystems, and also not only forests, but also peatlands and others, and also the change of the agricultural system. And if we really, you can look at that report instead of me giving you new data on that, but if we do that, we really could stop climate change and start restoring it, which is something that we don't often hear. I will say that forest is definitely one of the major things we have to care about, because it has to do with everything in the planet, and forests are always inhabited. There is no non-inhabited forest in the world, and people in forests are indigenous peoples. So and they are very connected. And this connection goes through not only forests, but also the whole food system, really. I would also like to say that the first cause for deforestation is the expansion of the agricultural frontier, and it's the industrial agriculture frontier. So not only, but 90% of that or more. So these two things are very connected. Deforestation, climate change, loss of biodiversity, contamination of water is all connected also through what we call the food system, which is not only what happened in agriculture. The IPCC recognizes that the main single cause of gas emissions that cause climate change is energy production and extraction. But the second is deforestation and agriculture. This is something from IPCC. We have done a study that we started 2009. So we are on the third edition, that is called "In the Face of Climate and Food Crisis, Who Will Feed Us?" It's called "Who Will Feed Us" for short, and where we have taken the majority of the sources from the United Nations. But we also have taken from other research organizations, and so I'm coming to indigenous knowledge if you want that later, I'm sorry. But I wanted to give this, the context for this. And what we found there is that, this is from another organization, it's not from us, but it's part of this collective research project. And is that between 44 to 57% of greenhouse gas emissions comes from the industrial food system if you extrapolate all the different sectors into this system. And that is, for instance, as I said, deforestation, 90% is caused by agricultural expansion. So deforestation, industrial agriculture in itself, because of the heavy use of fuels and agrochemicals, all agrochemicals are oil derived. So it's all oil industry also. and then transports and processing and packaging and refrigeration, and all the big supermarkets are big energy wastes, so to say, but also organic waste takes a big part, like 3-4% is the organic waste that is producing methane and other gases. So this is not only a big problem, it's also by looking this, we say, well, but who is producing the food? Because maybe you are, and this is the big issue here that we found when we started this study 10 years ago. 70% of the people of the world get food or solely or the majority of the food from what we call the peasant food web, that is small food producers, indigenous peoples, peasants, farmers, small farmers, but also gatherers, hunters, and urban gardeners. And UNDP, which is a UN agency, they, for instance, have this astonishing figure that is that 15 to 20% of the food that is produced by urban gardeners. Those that we look at as urban gardeners, that's nothing. Urban gardeners are those who, many of them in the rest of the world, I know that you are I think most of you are based in the US, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but this is a very common reality for outside here, the urban gardening, and also because there are people that were living in the countryside and then they came to the cities because they migrated and they continue producing there. So this, with only 25% of the land and 10% of the agricultural water and less than 10% of the fuels used in agriculture, they produce food for almost 70% of the people in the world. So, and this part, which is the small, the peasants, indigenous, small farmers, what we call the peasant web, but it's a broad concept that you can see what we include inside. This is already existing, so this is the good news. But it's very threatened. It's threatened by what? By the same things I was mentioning before, by the loss of biodiversity, the contamination of ecosystem, the deforestation, and also the lack of recognition of this enormous contribution. And this is completely connected to indigenous knowledge, so to say, but this traditional and indigenous knowledge. There is a continuum there. You cannot see, knowledge is something that you can make an inventory. Inventory, yeah, thanks. Or, no, it's not, because it's something that is living. It's like if you were in the panel when Minnie was speaking, and she said, don't speak about us like we were something from the past, we are here. And, she was saying that, and it's not, knowledge is not a book for us, knowledge, our whole livelihoods. So basically, this continuum and these facts on the production and the enormous contribution and potentiality that's supporting, traditional ways of living and indigenous peoples is not something for them. It's for all of us, because most of our food depends on them. Most of our food that we eat every day. But also, as I said before, and I will finish it, is that I mentioned this about the industrial food chain being the single largest contributor to climate change. So we can change that. We can really change that. But it's also the main cause to 6 of the main diseases that the most common diseases why people die. And they are not, they are the so-called non-transmittable diseases. Diabetes, cardiovasculares, whatever it is, I'm sorry. But if you go to the World Health Organization, among the 10 most common diseases, 6 are related to the food chain. So we have all reasons, climate, biodiversity, water, health, to change not only our habits, but look for more local food, see how we can establish this kind of direct networks. And it doesn't even need to be so-called organic. I do prefer that, and it's very important. But the issue is that it's almost more important that it's traditional and local than certified organic as such. Because the most important is that we can all access it and there are someone that can make their living on that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia, for that contribution on how we can include those groups and those types of knowledge into this system of climate action. I will be turning it over to Jerica now to potentially lead a short discussion for those who want to stick around for a moment or end with some finishing questions.
I hope you all stick around for this. We're going to open the floor for some discussion and appreciate everyone who's presented today. Let's talk about something really clear here that I appreciate that Gail brought up. We must have intergenerational collaboration here. She is right. It's not all up to the youth. We have to collaborate with our elders as well. We have to share lessons learned. We have to exchange knowledge. And technology itself is a very investable space, right? And so as the youth, during this last climate summit a few weeks ago, we were told all together that our meaningful participation is to encourage the ambitions of our heads of state to make the change that they need to make, and that's all well and fine, but how do we do it? How do we express to national and international governments that currently we're reshaping the framework on financing sustainable development? Where do we find our entry point into that particular system? It's important that we are to also encourage multilateral action for climate change. But that is a place where we have to pay attention to people. We have to pay attention to their livelihoods. We have to think local to go global here. And when we talk about local, we talk about local industry, our manufacturing industry, our supplier industry. What happens when renewables suddenly takes flight? There's a lot of people who are going to be out of the job. So we must realize that this space here it's a true struggle. We've got a lot of people who are clashing over this particular future because a lot of people are going to be put out of work. And when we think about financing sustainable development, I'd like to just take a moment to see how in this room we're having a great dialogue, but I'd like to make just a little bit of an outcome here. So how can we turn indigenous knowledge, nature-based solutions into something that's predictable enough that we can, predictable enough in regard to its impact and its change? How can we address that with financial systems? Because it seems as though we all run out of money, and that's the issue. We don't have enough investment from global wealth holders or government systems. How can we, yes, how can we put that into the framework so that it can be implemented on a global mandate? So now I ask you, how can the UN system better engage and empower non-state actors in climate action and resilience? So I want to open the floor there. Gail.
So I'm going to say something that people think but they don't say. You know, I was at the World Economic Forum this year, and they taught a human-centered approach about being authentic and transparent. Now, a lot of us don't want to show that. But I think I think the UN, I think we always want the UN to empower. The UN is a group that we are lucky to have, where people from anywhere in the world can come together and discuss their dialogue. As Jerica said, it's a dialogue. But at the end of the day, we have to understand something. The UN cannot do a darn thing about it. These staff members here, they work their butts off to ensure that we have this space to have this dialogue. So with that said, I think first we have to make sure as NGOs, we're not here to compete or look good, but that we are really here to do the job and do the work. And that's not saying we don't do it, but that we're not here to look good, and we're really here to work with each other and have it get done. And it's not about someone getting to the top or someone's NGO being seen first before the other. That's the first. Second thing is, you cannot turn indigenous, you have to go to the indigenous people. Ask them. Ask them. They were here and they still weren't really being heard. Ask them. You want to know how you can encourage and empower, I don't care if you're young, old, or a 2-year-old. You want to know how you can gain something from the people in the government of the member states? Go visit their country. Go talk to their people. Whether it's on the phone, Skype, Hangouts, I don't care what it is, Zoom, whatever you want to use, or physically there. Go talk to the official, because the government can't do everything. It needs all of us. But before non-state actors can actually step in here, in this building, and do what they need to do, we got to be really straight while we're here and what our purpose is, and make sure that we are really working together. And that's all I'm going to say.
The gentleman on the end, and then
Yes. Hi everyone. My name is Valentin Camano. I'm a UN representative for the delegation's outreach for Man Up campaign. And my colleague right here is correct. It is important to not undermine the indigenous culture, part indigenous, Mixtec from Mexico. And I wanted to bring an update from Mexico that they're opening an infrastructure where they're creating technology that 80% of like rural Mexicans do not have technology. That's what I wanted to bring up to some of you, especially aside that mobilization, yes, key is important, but we have to keep into account that indigenous youth, I'm just speaking for my country, certain sectors, not all of them, that we don't have technology. My parents come from agricultural background, so we don't have time for, we gotta pay bills realistically. That's just us. In underdeveloped countries, we don't have the time to pay for money for like a small mobile. But if we send these resources and give, just as she mentioned as well, visit other countries to dialogue and create infrastructures, send stakeholders to convince them that we're doing this, we're doing that, how can we show you past experience infrastructures that has been achieved in the home country or member state. And with that, we can show you action and validation. And also, the UN is just a platform. And we also have to share communication. Oh, we need your help with this collaboration, something that we're missing. And we can do that as well in collaboration, also with the intergenerational previous generation that stood up for us. And now they gave us this platform. If it wasn't for them, we won't be having this platform as we speak. Yes, challenges occur, but how can we achieve with technology that it is arising, and certain countries are arising with this concept? At the end of the day, if we achieve something, let's achieve the next one. With courteous.
Hi, my name is Pamela. I'm here with Tom and Eileen and Miro. And I'm also here with my own project called Thrive Consulting, and I've recently been working with the indigenous populations, primarily in North America and also South America. And I'm working with one tribal chief, where he wants to, his vision and mission is to create a uniform sort of sovereign body of indigenous council that are working together to reclaim their land and make it a sovereign, sustainable territory, and to take all the reservations basically and to transform them into a self-sovereign and sustainable land. So I've been introducing renewable energy projects to certain communities in California and at Standing Rock and other reservations. And with the renewable energy projects, it brings in a lot of prosperity for these communities. And with that, I'm introducing a renewable sort of regenerative policy for them to adopt too. That's completely, you know, something that I'm going to pass off to their governing councils and make it, you know, it's not some cookie cutter policy, but something that they can have themselves and shape. And it includes language revitalization, soil restoration, water cleaning, putting up solar, wind on their reservation. And sorry, I'm so tired. I have not slept well in days. My brain is like mush. But, yeah.
No, it's good.
Yeah, I wanted to put that out there though, because I know there's other people that are working in those realms. So please come and talk to me, because I would love to connect with you and work on this project together. It takes many hands to make light work. And I have a background in community organizing and youth leadership, and you know, I'm getting almost out of that age range. But you know, 10 years ago, we all started a national coalition called Energy Action Coalition, which is now called the Power Shift Network. And then I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but I really encourage you all to plug into it. And they do a lot of training around lobbying, like lobbying training, but also an action training. We had the largest lobbying day in 2009 around the American Clean Energy and Security Act. We had 12,000 youth come to Capitol Hill and really like persuaded our representatives to take on renewable energy as a platform for them to run off of, and change the language in our political atmosphere to start talking about across the board, Republican, Democrat, you know, to start talking about renewable energy. And you saw a shift instantly. You saw a shift. You know, the youth really do have a lot of power. Historically, we've always created change. We got the first black man, you know, elected as president. We've done a lot of good things, and I truly believe in the youth movement. Yeah, I would love to connect more with you guys too, though. California, Cal Poly. Some of our students were from E3 from Cal Poly. I don't know if you know that. But yeah, in the California Student Sustainability Coalition, I'm a co-founder of too. But yeah, it's beautiful to see you guys still going full force, and for like people to phase out and other youth to step up, and you know, it's just an ongoing cycle, which is really cool. But yeah, I truly believe we can learn from our elders and our indigenous, and give space to the voiceless, and learn from our wisdom keepers. One of the chiefs I work with, I love listening to him. I'll just like record his conversations and just get this download of wisdom. There's so much we can learn from the indigenous. It's beautiful. And I try to help him every way I can. I mean, he doesn't have basic skills like writing or reading, so I help him in every way I can, which is nice. And yeah, that's all. Please talk to me. Thank you.
We'll take about 3 more from the floor, and your first and second, and then I'll come over to this side. Okay.
I'm a member of IAI, also a member of an organization called Nation of Hawaii, based in Oahu. So long story short, the organization began in the 1980s, and what it was working, it was a homeless-led community that started occupying the beach on Oahu. A lot of the homeless people in Hawaii are Hawaiian. With rising prices, the indigenous people there were no longer able to afford housing and food and water. And so they basically occupied the beach for about 2 years and negotiated with the state to be given a plot of land that they could go out and live in Sand Lake. So that was in the 1980s. When we get today, there's a flourishing community of Hawaiians living sustainably, bringing back our indigenous knowledge in terms of agriculture, farming, and we've been leveraging social media for the past 10 years. So just over YouTube and Facebook videos, I've now forged a partnership with MIT Media Lab, and so basically building a learning media lab on our land and come and test hardware technology projects specifically for sustainable energy. So this is something that we built out of our family members that were living on a beach to now being able to build a media lab like that. And so we sort of take that knowledge, and what's the next level from there? We we build a incubator that basically looks to fund organizations that have a split of indigenous knowledge with cutting-edge cutting-edge technology. And so an example of that is a group that came to us, and they're basically, when our communities, people are bringing back fish pond restoration, so that was a way that we used to feed our communities. We would build these fish ponds that had gates that would open when the tide was up, and then we'd shut them when the tide went out, we'd have fish there. And that's how communities were able to easily fish, feed their communities. Those are now being restored. And as that's coming out, it used to be, kahunas or experts that could put their finger in the water, taste it, and understand what needed to be added to the water to create a great ecosystem. That's a piece of knowledge that's not going to be transferred forever. So they started partnering with these kahunas and building, pieces of IoT hardware they could put in the water and actually test it. What they started realizing is they could also test, the fish going back and forth. And what they developed was a machine learning algorithm that can now be used, basically spun out and sold at ports, because the ports are trying to, scan the water to understand what's going in and out. And so, these are ways that we're using our indigenous knowledge, transforming it into technology and trying to find ways to spin it out and create revenue sources that will directly invest back into our communities. So there's ways of that happening. And I wanted to end with a sort of short way that we're giving back. And so in the 1970s, there was a group of Hawaiians and Polynesians that built a voyaging canoe called Mobilization. At that time, the idea was to prove to Western historians that we were the first discoverers of our land, and we basically built this replica canoe and sailed it back to Tahiti, where we initially came from, and back without any navigational equipment. So the Spurn is this full, excitement back into wayfaring or sailing in that way. About 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was 2013, a worldwide voyage left with that same canoe, and it sailed around the entire world. So it left Hawaii, went to Australia, South Africa, Brazil, up and down the East Coast, back to Hawaii. And without any navigational equipment. And what we did in each port that we landed was we made contact with the indigenous tribe to ask permission. What we did is we taught that knowledge to those elders. We explained to them how we were sailing by the stars. One of the things I was doing was bringing the New York tribes together. And after spending some time in Long Island with the Shinnecock Nation, I realized that they used to sail up and down the East Coast, and they did it in a similar fashion, and they were just getting back in their canoes, and they didn't know how to sail by the stars. And so I brought some of our navigators up there, brought the kids. They actually flew some kids from Hawaii to go meet that tribe, and they were in the water together in canoes, teaching them how to sail by the stars. And so that transfer of knowledge was one of the most powerful experiences I've seen in my life. That's something that, as we're bringing our culture back within our own communities, we're trying to do the same for others. So the more that those connections can be made, I think the stronger that our world can be. Big examples of that. Our doors are open. If you're ever on Oahu, look up Asian Hawaii, find them on Facebook. They'll open their doors. They're in Waimanalo, Oahu, and they'd love to speak with you and tell you about what we're working on.
Awesome. Thank you, my ladies.
I'll try to keep it short because I'm also as tired as I'm assuming everyone here is. My name is Ruby. I am with California Polytechnic State University and Engineers Without Borders. I am a project manager for our Thailand team, and just through project management and leadership, as well as just being a student, and then coming here, I've just seen the same themes over and over again that all of you have been repeating, and it's wonderful, the general we in the solution, as not just youth or not just indigenous people or not just one group or another group, it's all of us, and we have to use that collaboration in order to find solutions. And looking at natural systems as well as utilizing indigenous knowledge can really create these amazing synergies between the advancing shiny technology coming out, such as the eco machine, and figuring out ways to remediate a lot of the pollution that we are continually going to sadly develop, as we are addressing situations such as the carbon in our atmosphere and different air emissions. We also need to address the solid waste that is surrounding our earth, so much so that we are having marine animals wash up on every shoreline of the world right now, and mass numbers, with a similar theme of massive amounts of plastic within their stomachs. We need to address these situations, and I think the best way to do that is through these synergies that we have been talking about throughout this whole week feels like a weekend. But utilizing the knowledge that is here existing has been tested over generations and generations, as well as pairing that with this new and creative way of approaching issues is how we are going to solve these problems. And working together and having dialogue like this is wonderful, but we need to put that into action as well. So I just, reiterating what's already been said so many times, we need to look at the pollution management as well as ceasing our carbon emissions. Well, you know, if we're looking at like the ideal situation. But overall, just thank you to everyone who has been doing so many amazing things. And I'm so inspired by everyone who's spoken, everyone who hasn't, that I've just met individually. And yeah, to close, you're all awesome. Thank you.
This side of the room. And then first? Or who was first? Do you know? Yes, sir.
Yep. John's driven put the people and projects together here in the UN for decades. And just a couple of quick observations. One, when you mentioned about not your words, but the rich and the connected being the ones who are in the youth that gets to get heard. Look at the World We Want campaign that the UN ran a few years ago. They got, if I remember the numbers, there was something like 6 million responses to what they wanted the world leaders to do. And most of those responses did not come electronically. Most of those responses happened by somebody doing sneaker net. They went out and talked to people, gathered responses, and then they communicated them. So the great majority of the responses in that very powerful campaign were from people who had no access to technology. And this, so the task for anybody who's working on this is figure out how to mobilize the armies you have to go out and do that outreach. One organization that I'm doing that with is Rotary. 750,000 youth in high school and college and graduate school level, in 25,000 clubs around the world. I mean, that's a lot. We're going to mobilize that to do this. The second one, what you mentioned here about how your platform works, which I want to find out more about. When you mentioned text messaging, for example, mobile, everything that everybody's doing, try to run it on mobile if you can, because it's already out there. My own organization has been doing computer donations by the 40-foot container road all over the world since 1984, and I try very hard not to do that, but to work with what's already there, and what's there is mobile. And in Africa, it's mostly still feature phones. So if you can run things on that, please do it, because that way you don't have to deploy the hardware, you don't have to do the training, you already have it. Second, the next one, blockchain. We have one project in the reuse community, which is to do reverse supply chain for e-waste. And that's being built on blockchain. So if anybody wants to know about that, I can refer you to it. Investiture. In October, there's a project that the nuclear disarmament community were pulling together to do the project which we call Counting the $1 Trillion, which is the $1 trillion that's about to be flushed down to the sewer in new nukes. And to dramatize this is going to be a project to literally count the $1 trillion. And the only way you can do it and get it done in a week is if you print $1 million bills, and so that's what we're going to do. Print $1 million bills, and then count it, in a truck with a plexiglass back end, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, in front of the UN, in front of the New York Stock Exchange, and in front of companies, that are benefiting from selling all that nuclear stuff, which is just a total waste. I mean, it's the exact opposite of what is needed. Engineers Without Borders, Bridges to Prosperity, one organization we work with that builds footbridges for communities where they're separated from the rest of the world by a ravine, which goes with water. People fall in and die, or they can't get to a clinic to get a medicine, and somebody dies because of that. They can't get a crop out, things like that. There are about 30,000 around the world. And we'll have to scale that up if they're doing it with Rwanda, to do thousands of those footbridges in Rwanda, in other words, the whole region, not just one region at a time. And the upshot of this is we get people who are already doing agriculture there will make 30% more when you give them the footbridge. And they can do it with traditional methods. So this is a way to get more power out of that. Last one, Gizmo. The Geographic Information Systems and Mapping Operations, the Geographic Information Systems and Mapping Group that we work. There are these groups all over the world. They're an ally. Yesterday, the U.S., a New York City official said we need to do something like the 520 miles of coastline in New York City. And this is what it's going to cost. Totally wrong, because you didn't have the geographic information. So in Gizmo, the group offered to do pro bono all of the planning work so they actually work with the best information. So if anybody who's doing anything that involves geography, that's probably all of us, look to the local GIS and mapping groups for pro bono support on this, because that way you tailor stuff and then you go to a funder and go there with something that's really convincing. So just a few observations, and this has been fantastic. I want to follow up with Catherine.
Hello, thank you so much for the inspiring session. I am Virginia Murat and founder president of the Light Planning Organization. We are a multimedia and cultural organization. Actually, I must say, I may dare to say, the launch as the global open platform to contribute all ideas, including climate change, eradicating hunger. So it was like promoting freedom of expression from the positive perspective that people don't have access, especially media, and everyone is not, tech savvy. So like who wants to share something, and we are offering a platform as based on their experience, interest areas, but not politics and religious propaganda. So that's kind of our background, but I have another angle, 2 points. One is we organize, because we are also associated with now the name has changed to Department of Global Communications. It used to be Department of Public Information since 2005, and we've been involved in the UN NGO, now UN Civil Society conferences. In 2007, actually, we conducted, presented a workshop on climate, wild cards in climate change. What I have not heard here is that this is a serious issue, and I know it's also part of military issue. There are, at the time, I couldn't follow up to date, but 45 package in climate, any power country may, any, let's say, enemy, so-called, then they can harm the drought, and where is the, storm, even tsunami. Those things, I think when we are talking about climate change, really you need, especially youth, should tackle those, follow up, bring and connect all this, very, I think, highly relevant, but it has been said so far. And that's, modifying the, genetically modifying the air and climate, and opposite side of the Quran is the genetically modified food and agriculture and water, and we're talking about climate change and pollution, and so if we are really not focusing also on the equal level, both from the genetically modified clouds and air and climate, and then also if we are not fully focused on the earth and soil and agriculture, water, and so I maybe not agree with Mr. OConnor, because I don't really think there is organic food. I really don't think everything is polluted because rain and irrigation and you can isolate the weather, you know, atmosphere. So, but then also the modifying climate and modifying the food and agriculture and the pesticides and pollution, I think we should all this action. That's my little contribution as the architect.
Excellent. Thank you. And lady, if you can make it very fast.
Yeah, it's actually a very quick comment. Hi, my name is Thomas. I'm an earth scientist based in Germany. And just wanted to make a comment about the fact that the indigenous knowledge may not always be very obvious when you go to a community. I work with mountain communities of Central Asia, in Tajikistan, the Karr Mountains, to figure out how we can reduce their level of earthquake risk. And oftentimes when we visited structures and that people live in that have been built for hundreds of years, and ask people, what do you do during an earthquake? They tell us that, oh, we go and we grab onto these columns in the structure because these columns represent certain prophets within their religion. And this, for an outsider like me, this might sound a little bit confusing and maybe not very, something that maybe sounds like a myth or a legend. And so this is an indigenous knowledge that is not obvious to us because it is not explained in a language that maybe outsiders would understand. And but the more time I spend with them, and I also brought an earthquake engineer who looked at the design of these structures, and it turned out that these columns are built in a way to support the structure around them. So when all the walls are collapsed externally, where the columns are is where the structure is going to actually hold. So it's very important that when we are trying to document and use indigenous knowledge to take our time, be a little bit patient and investigate a little bit more rather than writing it off as a legend or a myth.
So I'll give it right back to close in a moment. We've run out of time here, but I do want to say in regard to us actually taking action here, I'd like you to look at today's dialogue more as we'd like to immediately include you into a form much like a compact. This multi-stakeholder partnership is something that we are building out with multiple factions, but today we have so many solutions in this room that I encourage you to please bring your informations up here so that through June 7th, we're going to be having planning meetings, very strategic planning meetings for this particular compact and its structure so that we can really take action. You know, beyond concert series, how we can truly create structures for implementation in national and international frameworks for financing sustainable development, as well as engaging and really performing mass mobilization toward the achievement of the SDGs. So please bring your informations here. I think that we're all on one accord and we're willing to partner with each other. Everyone raise your hands if you're willing to do that, please. Thank you. So that's all I have to say, and bless you all for being a part of this and really getting down and participating in discussions. And I'll give the floor back over. And
just briefly, thank you all for staying this late and engaging in this important discussion. I'm really excited to have you all here and have some important comments from the audience as well. Thank you to our panelists for joining us for this discussion, and thank you IAAI Glochow for partnering with us on this event, and as well as Yanbo. So thank you all.
Shall we make a photo?
Yeah, if anyone can stay for a
whoever
photo.
wants to come.
I just want to say one last thing. With each person here, you know, we're always in the UN every day. Your barista, the people that you deal with every day, talk to them about the SDGs, what's important to them. That's what I do every day.
That's
Just
nice.
do that. With anybody you meet on the plane, anywhere, talk to them.
Yes, very
Thank
good.
you.
There is hope.
Yes.
Hope.